What is up? What is up, YouTube? This is Dave Croft, and welcome back to another production music walkthrough. We're taking a little bit of a different angle this week, and we are looking at a tension cue, specifically kind of an ominous, dark tension cue with a little bit of kind of light tension element to it. This is a track called Evolving Intent and was recently featured in the Oxygen Network's new show called Dying to Belong. And yeah, I really enjoyed putting this together, and one of the reasons I wanted to show this cue specifically for you today is to kind of unpack that sometimes less is more, and tracks don't have to have, 15, 20, 30 different layers in order to make it onto TV. And they can be really, really simple, very straightforward. There's not a lot going on harmonically here. But today we're going to look at and take a deep dive into the sounds, the libraries, the patches, the arrangements, and some of the lessons learned for Evolving Intent. One of the challenges of working with tension cues is that you have to try to do a lot with fewer layers, especially if you're talking about light tension or dark or ominous tension. Now, if you're looking at like dramatic tension, which are kind of like action scenes, then we can get away with a lot more orchestration going on with those. However, for ominous tension cues, it's a lot of drones, meaning that we have long extended harmony, and we still have to be able to give an editor or a music supervisor little cue points and hit points and areas that they can edit to. Now, when we're dealing with a hip-hop track or even a dramatic action cue or something, then those phrases are really well defined. Usually 4 or 8 bars, depending on your tempo. But for tension cues, especially ominous, droney tension cues, that becomes a lot murkier. And so, how do you kind of write those things, and how do you make sure that you still have building up throughout your cue? Well, that's one of the challenges of writing tension cues. So let's first take a look at some of the samples, or look through all of the samples for this track. Like I said, not many tracks going on. My main primary melody, if you will, it's not really like a melody per se, but this is a track or a patch called Tongue Drum from Sonic Couture. And this is from the Imogen Heap box of tricks from Sonic Couture. And I'm a huge Imogen Heap fan, back from her Frou Frou days. And I really like her compositional style. I really like kind of who she's about as an artist. She's an amazing singer, an amazing producer. Her things sound great. I love the fact that many of her records have instrumental versions alongside of those, and as a producer and a composer myself, I've actually spent more time listening to those than I did her tracks with vocals. And so she put out a patch library called Imogen Heap Box of Tricks, and let's see, and it has a lot of really interesting sounds from her own personal library. And scrolling to it here, and you can see different instruments. They've got an mbira, they have boomwhackers, a cello, cocktail kit, glockenspiel, and this tongue drum, which kind of sounds like a hung drum or a handpan, but this, I think, is a tongue drum cut out of the words flaking on me, like a propane tank, gas tank. Obviously new, not used. Whatever you do, don't go slicing into your dad's propane tank or the propane tank that's hanging out underneath your gas grill. No, I'm not encouraging you to do that. But you can cut slits out of it. And so this this is really, when I started this cue, it's just got a little bit of delay on there. And this is the drone. It's the harmony. It's just playing on G's the whole time. Boom, boom, almost like bell tones. And then the tongue drum also has another patch, which is the reverse. So you can reverse the tongue drum sound, and this is, if I had a melody, it would be this. There's some delay on there. It kind of goes around, and here's the second half of the melody. So really, really simple. Let's put that in forward and see what that sounds like. Forward. Let's tuck you over there. Then, and the resolution of that melody resolves. So kind of playing them together. Which has kind of a rhythm to it already. No CPU spike there, sorry about that. So let's turn on the reverse and listen to it in reverse. Whole different vibe, an entirely different vibe. And so you can see, as with most of my cues, there's not a lot going on in this track. There's a little EQ and some delay, and really pretty much that's it. That's all that's happening on there. And then I have a couple of natural forces, which is a gravity pack through Heaviosity, and I am in love with what Heaviosity does. I love how their sample libraries just sound great out of the box. And they have these gravity packs. Now, Gravity is a library, and it's pretty pricey. I think it's like $500 or something. But if you wait around until either Memorial Day or especially like Black Friday, then you can get those on sale. And that's when I got this. When I got Gravity here. So Gravity is a library synth, wavetable synthesizer, and grain table synthesizer, and all of that. And really, really cool. And so they've kind of split off using the Gravity engine, which is this guy right in here that does all of this business. Using the Gravity engine, they kind of splintered off these sub-packs that don't require the primary Gravity plugin, the primary Gravity library. And so they have this. They have a library called Natural Forces. I believe I've waxed on about this before. And so this is just a straight up, just kind of a pad sound, specifically called rim rubs. And with a tension cue, we have, especially ominous tension cues, we have the drone. And put that together with the tongue drum. Now, EQing these can be a little bit of a challenge because we've got already, just with these sounds, we've already got a lot of bass starting to cook around. And so we want to make sure that, that they are all represented and not cutting through. So you can see what I've done here, kind of trimmed off the bottom end, gave the bottom end, let me use my little tool here, gave the bottom end here, and where this is cutting through, I've gone and notched out. Right, those are called complementary EQ curves. So I cut one and notched the other. I did want to coax a little bit more high end out of both of these sounds, and so I kind of just juiced up the high end on the EQs. Nothing fancy. You can see, again, not a ton of compressors and everything. It's really, really simple and straightforward. Okay, so that's my kind of my pad, my drone. The last thing I wanted to add was didn't mean to retitle that. Last thing I wanted to add was a synth pulse idea. Okay, and so synth pulses are one of the hallmarks of tension cues, especially tension cues that kind of push into light tension cues, meaning that there's always just kind of this energy underneath it, usually a synth just kind of cooking along, and this is an evolve patch. Evolve, another Heaviosity. I tell you what, this today is brought to you by Heaviosity. I think 80% of my plugins here are Heaviosity, and so the library here. Let me go down to Evolve. I need the drum like hits. That's Rhythmic Suite. I'm sorry. Yeah, so we're here into the basic synth pedal. So we're in here, and so there are blocks of patches that are all pitched, and they are separated here. You can tell by the black notes or the blacked out notes. And so if I go down here, and then if I go up the octave. Now, I could have brought in an arpeggiator and thrown on a filter and done all of that. But man, if I'm looking to make production tracks, I'm usually looking to turn tracks around pretty quickly. And so anything that I can do to kind of get a shortcut to that. Now, I've also put a low pass on here just to trim off some of the highs there. And again, EQ'd out some of the lows so it doesn't step on all of the other bass sounds we've got going on. So essentially, we have 4 layers that make up the bulk of the cue. Now, these are just kind of cooking along the whole time. And you'll notice, aside from my reverse melody coming in here, at the around the 14-second mark, and then again later around the minute 8, it's all the same. Which on one hand, it's kind of okay. Yeah, that's easy. I could do that. Just set up a thing, loop drag, and call it a day. However, we need a little bit more from that for our music supervisors, or rather our editors. We've got to give them more form. We can't just kind of loop drag and call it a day. It's going to be too repetitive and too boring. And so enter other effects or kind of synth effects. And so this first synth effect is another Natural Forces, which is from their rumbles and effects, which is just almost kind of like a whale song kind of thing. And that's pitched. Let me go down here. And so these are all different types of effects that you can pitch using these quick keys down here, or these hot keys, key switches, I should say. All right, so just kind of cool, really moody sounds. And so I have one here, and then one here. All right, so I put the first one to conclude the first 2 measures. Okay, and so I'm thinking 2, 4, 8 bar blocks. Let me start that again. That's the end of my 4th bar. So I've now signaled the end of my first 4-bar phrase, and now I am about to signal the end of my 8th bar. All right, which was one of the things I found, and admittedly, I kind of overused it when I first found it because I was so in love with this patch, and it is a dumpster hit. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Disturbing dumpster hit, right? Okay. And unlike the other patch, which had a bunch of different sounds that you could pitch, this has one sound spread across the entire keyboard, with this C here, middle C, being the root note, or the note that it was recorded on, or at least entered in. Just really, really very interesting, very cool sound. I've gone ahead and thrown on a sample delay on here, where I just delay the left by a few samples, or a few milliseconds rather. How many milliseconds is that? 15.2 milliseconds. I prefer samples, but you can absolutely use milliseconds if that makes you feel better. And that makes it a delay, so the left side is delayed just a little bit, which makes it sound a little bit louder, or a little bit wider. So that's without the sample delay. And it just kind of spreads it out just a little bit, just a little bit there. And so that is the dumpster hit by natural forces. Had to be really kind of conscious of the low end on that, because without the EQ, there's tons of low end. And let me actually turn off my my low cut there, and let you hear that, and you can see, which is cool. That ring out, but this is stepping all over my tongue drum specifically, and my pad, which I have already said, okay, the low end is getting to the pad. So EQing and everything, we have to be really conscious of that when we're writing these types of tracks. All right, so because this is the end of my 8th measure, all right, I kind of have at the end of the fourth measure, I have a little whale song, kind of thing, which is saying this is the end of my 4th measure. Again, we're giving an editor somewhere to edit to, or at least giving them kind of signposts of the form. Drone cues like this, ominous cues, can really get too mushy, where you can't really tell like where the form is, and you really can't tell where any kind of phrasing is, and we don't have the benefit of a little jangly melody kind of communicating that for us. So we put things into our cue to be those signposts for editors. Okay, so coming up into our 8th bar, this is another signpost, a big signpost, because this is the end of our 8th bar. I have the same little kind of whale song thing, and then my secondary whale song. All right, so we're kind of cooking along, and enter a riser, a pretty lengthy riser, specifically a 16 count riser. This is a plugin from Native Instruments called Rise and Hit, and I really, really like it. It's a little processor intensive, as are some of the gravity packs. You've heard, I don't have a lot going on, and I have pretty beefy iMac, but the gravity engine is a little processor intensive. And before I would bounce this into place, I would either, or before I would render this, I would freeze a bunch of tracks, or bounce them into place and render them as audio. I forget what I did when I actually delivered this. Regardless, this is a library called Rise and Hit that I really, really enjoy. And the reason I enjoy it is because, let me turn this up just a little bit. There are a lot of things designed in this plugin that make a working composer's life easier. First of all, we can time out how long the riser is. So if I need a 4-beat riser, if I need an 8-beat riser, and a 16-beat riser. So we have the rising action, which is this side of the library, and then we have the hit, hence the rise and hit. Right now, I can actually play the riser up through the hit, or I can play just the hit, which are really good for stingers and that kind of thing. All right, so the ability to stretch this, the ability to have this split, the ability to go in and individually change out the rising sounds as well as the decay, volume, and how they release. Really, really, really good. You can set the volume, you can set the offset, and how soon into the rise and everything do they come in. So you can absolutely check that out. Rise and Hit. It's part of Complete and absolutely worth the money. I bought it when it first came out. I was so excited about it, and I have not regretted this purchase at all. To the point where it's so good. I'm pretty sure I heard it in the Avengers Infinity War soundtrack, and I love me some Alan Silvestri. Just see my video on Sunrise on the Green and how I really borrow a lot from him, and he was a huge influence on me as a composer. And I'm pretty sure I heard one of a rise and hit patch in one of the cues. And so, yeah, that was cool. All right, so this is a nice 16 bar, and you can see I kind of have phrase here, a phrase here, a phrase here, and a phrase here, and this is a phrase, and this makes kind of a longer phrase. And this is another phrase with my longer phrase, and this is 16 bars pushing to or 16 counts rather, I said 16 bars, pushing through to the end of this larger phrase. Okay, so I always try to think phrasing, macro and micro phrasing, right? So we have 4 bars, 4 plus 4, that's 8. Then I have 2 8-bar phrases, and that is 16. And that's what I'm doing here. This large riser is signaling the 16 bar point. Now, depending on how long your cue is, this is around a 90-second cue or so a minute and a half. And so I'm not exactly halfway through. It's a little bit further, but it's really near the 1 minute mark. And so it's important when you're writing your cues, in addition to the phrasing, you always try to have 15 seconds, 30 seconds-ish, 60 seconds. And so that's what I'm thinking. Now, if we tried to make it exactly 15 and exactly 30, then we'd have to set everything to the same tempo every single time. But we don't want to get into that. But you'll see I have roughly, 4 bars is 15-ish seconds. Then we start getting into, 30-ish seconds. And then we're getting into around a minute. Okay, and so that doesn't dictate the way you write, but it's something that should be floating into your, it should be floating in your brain. By the way, that should be called riser. Let's listen to it in context. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of energy pushing in. All right, and then I needed to add one more layer into here. Just another rhythmic layer. This is another evolve patch. It's part of that same, I think it's part of the same library, just a different. Yep. So the synth pedals. And for the first time, I hint at a progression. It's not much. It's just G's. Where am I? I'm way up here. going up to that A flat, and that's that minor second. Man, you hear that all the time. You hear root up to a minor second. You're going to hear it in dramatic tension cues. You're going to hear it in light tension cues. You're going to hear it. You'll definitely hear it in some of my orchestral hip hop tracks. I'm sure we'll get into. And so yeah, I needed to add something more. This is at the 16 bar mark, and with these tension cues, we are building tension towards the final stinger or the final button. And so I like to think of it as kind of a textural crescendo where we're adding textures, and we don't want to stair step. You don't want to, layer, 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 layer. We don't want to look like that, but we do want to push energy into the final downbeat or the final stinger here. All right, let's listen to some of these patches together. First of all, let's listen to the tongue drum and the evolve. And I'm starting it on the and of the beat. So we have basically the bong, bong. And so these become very, very close to sound. It's close to sound, close to kind of one sound. All right, so let's listen to that plus the other bass layer. All right, the bass layer, the evolve layer, one by itself. And you notice there's nothing on the and. There's a little hole there. And so pop in this. This is me. This is me cueing it. Now, as I'm looking at it, I notice I did not throw an EQ. I absolutely should have thrown an EQ on there. Lessons learned. Lessons learned. All right, everything. And you notice when this second evolve patch comes in, it's not. As a matter of fact, if I had not really pointed it out, you might not really notice it, because what I don't want is that patch to come in and say, hey, look at me, I'm new and interesting. I just need to add a little bit more intensity, a little bit more energy as we're driving to the end of the cue. Did make a callback to my tongue drum from earlier, so I made a callback to that as we are coming into the landing, hitting around the 90-second mark. Okay, and then really allow that the full release of the riser as well as the dumpster. Okay, so those are all the patches going on. Again, every 4 bars we want something new to happen, and try to give your music supervisors or give your editors signposts. This is 4 bars, this is 8 bars, this is 4 again, this is 16, and we're pushing energy into it. You'll notice a couple of other tracks in my arsenal here, or in my little arrangement view. And the first thing is a delay. I was noticing that after my button, or rather my stinger, I had too much delay, which kind of ringing out. And so all I did was I went in and automated this delay here. It's really simple to automate the delay, and if you're using Logic, you might say, hey, that's not showing up in my track listing. You have to right-click or control-click and create a track. I've already created it. If you can also do the same for the output, and that's what I've got going on here as well. So I needed to go in and just automate the volume of my delay so it doesn't. Let me turn it off. Let me turn off the automation, and you'll hear it ring out. It's too much. I don't want all that. I don't want all of that. So I automate it out so it goes away. So we have a nice clean button. We don't have any rhythm carrying past that final button or stinger. And the last automation that I have is whenever you're dealing with pads usually have super long release tails. And so it was a little bit too long. And so I go in and I automate my output, just the volume of the output. If we're looking at, so I'm automating this guy right there. I don't really automate the master. As a matter of fact, I could probably just get away with not even showing it. But I wanted to automate the output so that when I trimmed it, or rather when I bounced it, it had a nice natural sounding decay, but I didn't have, these release tails, which are so quiet, but add length to the actual file itself. I didn't need 10 seconds of minus 60 dB audio tails, floating around. All right, so you go in and you automate the output here. Nice slow fade with a little curve on it. So that hits, it holds, audio tail still going. And so what I'm really doing is artificially increasing the rate of decay here. And that's what that's doing. Yep, and it gives me ultimately with my audio tail about a minute 45 going on there. So looking at my mix EQs, nothing fancy. I am running, I did put in an Abbey Road vinyl, and this is just to kind of darken. I didn't put this in here to make it sound like vinyl. I wasn't looking to create a vinyl effect. I just really use it to darken the sound a little bit. Let me turn it off. Almost in a saturation, kind of tape saturation kind of way. And I have found that in certain applications, using the Abbey Road vinyl as a gain stage yields some pretty good results. And so that's kind of what I have going on here. You'll notice that I'm using the least vinyl-y sounding things and or the least vinyl-y sounding effects here. I don't have any kind of warble or anything, any flutter. It's all really using it as saturation and as gain staging. And then my mastering chain is my go-to Ozone mastering chain. Love me some Ozone. Easily my most favorite mastering chain. Really simple EQ. I don't even think I fired on the dynamic compressor. Little bit of exciter, some stereo spread, little post EQ, and then a maximizer or limiter to push us up a little bit higher. All right, so that is Evolving Intent. Man, I really thank you for hanging out with me today, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, why don't you give us a like? Here comes all the YouTube stuff. Give us a like. Consider subscribing to the channel, share it around, and leave comments. I really look for this to kind of be a community of composers. Again, just me doing my thing, kind of in a guerrilla composition kind of way. Not making things overly complicated, and really strategies and ideas for working composers or people interested in becoming working composers. So thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.